Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Moore McCallan. I'm the director of the Center for Latin American Arts. Thank you all so much for coming today. We're really excited about our ceramics roundtable, and I'm honored to have these three amazing women here today to be a part of our roundtable and student workshop and discussion. We're going to have two of our visitors here, obviously in person, and then Lauren is going to be joining us from Temple University in Philadelphia via Zoom. And we're excited to have students from Vanderbilt University, Temple University, and UTRGV coming together virtually today at this event. And the genesis of this event, and many others that are coming after it this month, is the exhibition Uncovered Spaces. It's an exhibition of women and LGBTQ artists, and it's going to be held at the International Museum of Art and Science, the IMAS, here in McAllen, and the opening is March 24th at 5 p.m. And we're hoping to have a great turnout from our university students, and we have 6 of the artists in the exhibition coming for the opening day ceremonies. And then Friday, March 25th, we're having a roundtable here in this space with our artists and any students and faculty who can join us. So we're excited to continue the conversations that start here today throughout the month as we open the exhibition Uncovered Spaces. And it's been an incredible effort. Our curator of the exhibition is here with us today, Professor Raheleh Sufi, one of our former colleagues here at UTRGV and mentor to many of y'all in the audience, and friend and colleague to our other participants and myself. And we have Brandi Cooper, our professor of ceramics here at UTRGV, joining us today. We're very thankful to have her. And we have Lauren Sandler joining us from Temple University via Zoom. So we're excited to have her and her students joining us virtually. And the exhibition Uncovered Spaces examines the social structures that mediate our everyday lives and how our identity and gender and other ideas are bound up in our artistic practice, in the creative practice, and also how we interact with the world, and also ideas of how our artist practice affect our environment, our community, and our relationships with others. So we're excited to create a space to continue these conversations and start them today with this roundtable. And we're going to begin with Professor Phil Sufi speaking, and then Professor Sandler will speak, both as the artists involved in Uncovered Spaces, and then Professor Cooper will be speaking as well about her practice and her pedagogy and how some of the ideas of the exhibition are relevant in her practice and others. And then we'd love to hear from y'all, hear from the students and about your work, if we can discuss any of it, help build and create ideas, critiques, anything that y'all would like to share. We're excited to talk with you about it. So without further ado, I will introduce Rafael Sufi, as mentioned, dear colleague, friend, and just amazing mentor in many ways. And as y'all know, Professor Phil Sufi got her MFA at Florida Atlantic University. She taught here at UTRGV for 5 years, 6 years? 4? Felt like 6. But it was 4, and then she has now accepted a position at Vanderbilt University. So even though she's a few states away, we obviously stay in great contact, and we're excited to collaborate with her at UTRGV and create a larger network of relationships nationally now, with her being a faculty at the School of Art at Vanderbilt. So Raheleh's work is multidisciplinary, and she utilizes ancient and contemporary art media in her ceramics, poetry, ambient sound, and video to address issues regarding human conditions from a personal perspective. And Phil Sufi is an assistant professor of ceramics now at the Vanderbilt University in the Department of Art, and we're excited to have her today to present about her work. Thank you, Raheleh.
Thank you so much. Well, hello everyone. So great to see many familiar and kind faces. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm happy to see new faces. I'm so honored to be here on in such an important day, International, Day for Women. And be at the presence of so many beautiful, amazing, hardworking women that they are presenting today. Thank you, Dr. McCallan. It's just honor always to work with you, and thank you for inviting me. The Valley has always been my home, and from the day that I came here till today, when I came yesterday, it felt really I landed at home. So happy to be here and seeing you all. I'm gonna go to my presentation. So as a multidisciplinary artist, my ideas and experiences coalesces into the reality of social practice. The aftermath of 2016 election and the hegemony of the Trump administrations over the nation led my practice and directed to address many different aspects of ongoing fiasco, anxiety, psychological traumas, human condition, and questionable social norms ever since. My work demonstrates themselves in various sort of artistic expression, which I use, as Catherine explained, through ceramics, poetry, ambient sound, video, and light. I use different aesthetic strategies, incorporating and experimenting with materials with wide range of relevant applications to my subject matter. Multimedia provides multi-layers of perceptions and interpretation, while each medium plays its own separate role in expression. Clay is always the nexus from which all my ideas emanate. I find clay to be cryptic, architectural, and it can provide a space where sound, video, and light is stored to create holistic sensory experience. Clay establishes various spaces for me to work with. The spaces include actual, conceptual, private, public, inclusive, exclusive, and all defines all the types of boundaries that one must dare to cross. I grew up during years of revolution and war in Iran. Since leaving that environment, I have lived in many other locations in Canada and the United States. As I traveled these lands, I became a collector of soil and sound, increasingly aware of what lies beneath. I have been archiving the resources of places that I have lived or have traveled through. And initially, I was interested in understanding in a place in terms of sound, and later harvesting sound. And after harvesting that, it's just kind of led to harvesting soil. So, and I'm also kind of fascinated with the possibility that I could capture the essence of a place beyond this ephemerality. So because sound is ephemeral, while soil is very solid and kind of has more root in a place. So my attention from around and above kind of shifted to what was beneath. So I started collecting sound, and then later started collecting soil. So this collection of this kind of a soil started from 2016. First, when I was in Chautauqua area in Western New York, where I was visiting artists during the summer. So this process of harvesting clay really transformed the way that I see my own work, and also helped me to kind of create a relationship with some of these places that I visit during this kind of archiving system. And I continued this process ever since. And so far, I have collected soil from over 100 places in the United States, which most from the Rio Grande Valley in border region, and so many of my students and even their family members helped me through this process and still helping me through this process, which I'm so grateful. So in 2020, I moved to Nashville, and that happened through kind of during the pandemic and all the issues that you all kind of aware of. As you know, this pervasive racial injustice, social inequity, immigrant incarceration, and ecological collapses has just happened all at the same time. And not that they didn't exist, it's just it seems like the world was more open and aware of all these issues. The health of the body politics literally and metaphorically came into sharp focus, and I find myself using my body as essential tool to investigate human relationship with natural and perceived geography. So I explored the notion of identity, otherness, and belonging as I was doing this process. As my personal physical isolation and the process of clay isolation progressed, I wondered about the future and what remains from some of these pieces that I make. Some of the questions that raised, it was just how can I, kind of as an artist, as a woman, and as a migrant, can be agent to expose the urgency for changes in contemporary moment through my work? How can I reimagine and transcend colonial narrative present in clay particles of the earth and historical artifacts? How can I cross boundaries of my medium clay to make my distinctive mark in this time, in this place, and for the future? So the work that you see is called Bite, and kind of happened during kind of pandemic. As I said, I was dealing with all these issues that also everybody, I'm sure all of you have been dealing with. So Bite became my practice of resilience and resistance. Form, patterns, and functions were captured as I sink my teeth into clay, creating an artifact from when my body and spirit were borderless, an act of defiance and affirmation. Both labor and ritual, the physicality of the action provokes attention to the internal, the resistance is to the past narrative, and the resilience in the creation of a new narrative that emerges in respect to the past knowledge. So my practice is looking at some of the indigenous practice and how they create their work, and what it means for me as an immigrant, merge my practice as a ceramic artist with the past knowledge from the land that I chose to live now. So biting establishes a pattern of my existence and validate my strength to navigate through the current political landscape. Leaving a mark of my existence carries into the future and changes the potentiality of the narrative. The metaphor becomes the physical, and each bite signals that I'm transforming the narrative. And in order to change the narrative, I had to become the narrative. So, perfect. And Catherine asked how I integrate my practice to my teaching. Education is a crucial platform for implementing change. As a teacher, I design projects very carefully, focusing on intention, purpose, and community building. I worked with undergraduate, graduate students, as well as artists, and mostly in some residencies, especially summer residency at Chautauqua, the School of Art, which I'm doing since 2016. So some of these projects that I'm working with the artist is to find sources for clay and explore the relationship of clay to the land. So the purpose for some of these projects is to collaborate and with the students to produce some of the work that is being collectively created. So through this process, we do so many other projects. The students kind of do the isolation process with me as I do it through my work. And then when they create their work, the clay that we kind of harvest becomes a platform for social interaction, for performances, and for possible collaboration that you can see some of them here. And as I mentioned above, I involve the students in community work, and one of the things that we did here in the Valley with my students, and I'm proud of this collaboration, is when Mariana Wright, who is the director of the National Butterfly Center, asked us to help with the fundraising, because it was in 2018, 2019, Trump wanted to build a wall right in that center, and the concern was how we could fight with this, and we needed support and money. The center really needed financial support. And what we did with the students, we created artwork from the soil that we harvested from the center itself, and we created artwork. And through a fundraising, we actually could raise around $2,000 for the center to be able to fight that issue. The issue hasn't been resolved, right? So many of you know if you follow the news, but we hope that some of the work that we do through our collaboration, and I'm sure that the younger generation and the next generation is doing the work to be able to protect this area. And the last thing is, I hope I didn't go over my time, is the curatorial project. As Catherine explained, I'm curating this exhibition, Uncovered Spaces, with collaboration with Dr. Catherine McCallan and with IMAS. And through this work, we create a space for women and non-binary artists to be able to have a space to show their work and also create a relationship with the community of Rio Grande Valley. And this is not only bring the outside community here, but also for artists and scholars outside of the valley to really see the potential of this region, the intellectual potential of this place for many dialogues that we can create to build bridges for future potential. Thank you so much for the time and opportunity. I'm excited to hear from my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Raheleh. So nice to hear from you and hear about your work. Our next speaker is going to be Professor Lauren Sandler, who's joining us via Zoom from Temple University in Philadelphia. Lauren Sandler is a ceramic artist and educator whose work deconstructs mythologies and investigates narratives of power and perspective. Sandler exhibits nationally, and she lectures and publishes concerning contemporary and historic issues in ceramics. She holds an MFA in ceramics from Penn State University and undergraduate degrees in anthropology and ceramics from Ithaca College and SUNY New Paltz. She's an assistant professor and program head of ceramics at Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University in Philadelphia. And she's currently serving as the director at large on the board of the National Council on Education for the Ceramic Arts. So please join us in welcoming Lauren Sandler.
Hi. Can you all hear me okay?
I think we can.
You can hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh wait, now we can.
Is that okay?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. It's a bit unnerving to see my head in that large screen behind you, but I'll try to ignore that and just talk. But thank you, everyone. Raheleh, thank you for just organizing the exhibition. It's always wonderful to be in shared space with you, even virtually. And Catherine, for all your work in organizing this event as well. I am going to share my screen. Bear with me. Let's see here. And hopefully you can all see this, because you'll let me know if there's any issues with seeing it.
No, you're good.
But you're okay?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So I'll talk to you a little bit about my work, about the work that I have, and specifically I'll talk to you a bit about my work and the ways I think about clay, and then also about, I have 3 pieces in the exhibition, and I'll talk specifically about those pieces. So I came to ceramics through my undergraduate study in anthropology. And that work, that study very much shaped my foundational thinking of clay, first and foremost as a cultural material. And that study in anthropology very much inspired my fascination with clay, a material that is all around us. It moves through space and time. It's something that exists, from Paleolithic figurines to being used in biomedical implants, as the image on my left shows, to bricks that were made by enslaved people for the White House, as one of those bricks is shown there in that mid image as well. It's the earth that we harvest our food. It's the cup that most of us have on our kitchen table. This material permeates our lives, and that ubiquity, I think for me really creates a familiarity and an intimacy and really an access point to address many themes, whether social, personal, political themes. And so clay is also an archival material. And I think about how that role allows for both a very tangible, but very also symbolic connection to other eras and peoples and cultures. And so clay as a material, it tells stories. And through looking at clay or studying ceramics, we unearth those stories, personal stories, political stories, stories of community, stories of change. And in my work, I often will look to artifacts and material culture as a means of dismantling and reconstructing narratives. And so some central questions that guide my work, both as an artist, but also as an educator, certainly are, who is in the clay and who tells the stories and what stories are often left untold? How are narratives written in the material? And what are the ways through which stories manifest? And so I think ceramics is such a vast material of, as Raheleh said, resilience and resistance. And I think that can challenge canonized knowledge. And so through my work as a teacher and an artist, I really aspire to more accurately reflect the past and contemporary expansive practices of clay. And I often think about what does a contemporary pedagogy of ceramics look like, and how to decenter or disrupt the mechanisms that often obfuscate or maintain very limited narratives and keep canonized mythologies in place. So as I mentioned here, the image on the left is an X-ray with an implant that has ceramic material in it, a brick from the White House. These bricks, as I mentioned, were made by enslaved people. And on the right is an image of my hands of a cup of clay that I harvested. So a few images here of the pieces that are in the show. So in my current series of work, I'm constructing vessels or making vessels really as an accumulation of parts in which I'm using a method of composing and disrupting forms through these stacked objects that can be assembled and disassembled to create different narratives. And then I adorn the vessels, as this one has, with different objects, really to explore this accumulation of material culture to offer different perspectives and stories. And so I'm really interested in challenging sort of the neutrality of materials and thinking more about the layered and complex history of materials. And so I hope to use the accessibility and familiarity of the vessel as an entry point to do that. And so this piece, Object of Attachment, which is really kind of a title that I'm not so settled with, but I need to call it something, so that's what I'm calling it now. This really started with more of a personal connection or personal object of the button, which is what is attached to the form itself. I come from a family of Italian and Jewish immigrants who came to New York, depending on the side of my family, 2 or 3 generations ago. My grandparents' generation were laborers. My grandmother on my mother's side was a seamstress. My grandfather on my father's side of the family was a sewing machine operator who made hats. And the buttons specifically that cover this, I mean, these are all ceramic, but they were looking at a collection of buttons that I have that actually comes from my partner's side of the family, her mother and grandparents. We have their collection of buttons. Her family comes from a similar cultural background of Jewish immigrants. And so this piece covered with buttons is then hung with spools, nails, and knots. And so I was thinking about this accumulation of diasporic material from our families and how that is passed on or sometimes forgotten or disrupted or erased. And so these objects they're objects of attachment, but they're also loaded with these, for me, these contradictions of how, of effect, connections can bind, piercings can mend, ties can restrict. And also this multiple meanings of connection in that the representation of objects that connect, but also these ideas of connection through passing of objects and skills. This piece sent from a series of pieces that I called my Centuripe series. This kind of begets the series of objects that I just showed, that is part of what I just showed you before. And these series of objects are informed by these, here I forgot I have an image here, of these are objects from they're called Centuripe ware, from Centuripe, Sicily, the region where my mother's family is from. They were produced in this short time period, 300 to 200 BC, in this one area of Sicily, what is now Sicily. And there's not that much written on these objects, not that many that still exist because of the short time period in which they were made. But it's believed that they were made for women and mark life transitions of marriage or death. And they signify both sort of sacred traditions, but also mundane use. And so for me, part of the research of this work really began with conversations with students about appropriation in ceramics, and considering what we look at as artists and what our work references, and how our personal relationship with those reference objects impact the content of our work, how certain power dynamics are established depending on who I am and what the work is that I'm referencing. And so this led to me doing research from objects from my own cultural lineage. And through that, I came to these objects, which really led to further consideration and research of objects of antiquity and the constructed mythology of antiquity that was created really during the Renaissance of antiquity being this racial and ethnic homogeneity, which is false. I've always just loved this image, and I show it when I can. The reality was of ancient Rome that you can be Roman and be Syrian or Judean or Nubian or Ethiopian and so on. And this is a tombstone, not quite from antiquity, from later Italy, but that really expresses this multi-ethnic past Italy. It's a tombstone of a Norman Sicilian person with Latin on the left, Greek on the right, Hebrew on top, and Arabic on the bottom. And so that's just sort of part of the research, that part of the series of objects. So this piece, these are, I'm depicting some ancient Jewish oil lamps, as well as other objects and goods that were depicted on those oil lamps that were kind of inscribed and etched into those clay oil lamps. And there's barley, there's some combs that were used for preparing fiber, keys, and pomegranate seeds, which are hanging. And so with this series of work, I was thinking, or really examining, kind of my own familial cultures to deconstruct the mythologies and historic narratives of power. This is an image of a piece in epinetron. Sometimes they're called oni. You might see them referenced with different names, but epinetron, which were made around 500 BC from Greece. And these were objects that were these are functional objects. They're essentially like a thimble for the thigh. They were placed over the thighs. Women would wear them in preparing wool. So it was a functional tool, but some research say it was also placed over the graves of unmarried women. I don't know the truth or the accuracy of that. And so I've been playing with this object and creating my own epinetron series. And this piece, I'm exploring the use of flax, which is an ancient fiber that's used to make linen. And so the piece itself is covered with flax seeds and hung with flax buds and whorls, which are used to spin yarn. So this is an ancient fiber with vast cultural, symbolic, and economic significance. One of the first domesticated plants. It's a main agricultural crop of ancient Egypt. And so in this series, I'm really also thinking about the history of material as commodity through flax and other goods such as salt, sugar, tea, coffee. I'm considering material extraction and production to examine economies of power, of migration and occupation, of labor and commodification. And I think I just have one last image here, which just is me kind of placing it. I actually made this to fit my thigh, but it's actually made to sit on, or to be on the wall. So that's it. I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was wonderful. Our third speaker is Brandi Lee Cooper, our professor of ceramics here at UTRGV. Brandi is a ceramic sculptor that works at the intersection of art and ecology. Her work is informed by her background in zoology and her commitment to bridging disciplines in order to serve as a witness to humanity's impact on the earth and an advocate for urgent change. Brandi is an Arizona native. She holds a BS in zoology from Northern Arizona University and an MFA in ceramics from Arizona State University. And she exhibits her work nationally and internationally and has been a resident artist in Rome, Italy, at Creta, the Tempe Center for the Arts, and the University of Kansas. So join us in welcoming Brandi and to our roundtable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCallum, for having me. Raheleh, Lauren, I'm so grateful to be on this panel with you incredible, brilliant, amazing women. This is a treat. Thank you for putting this together, all of you. Yeah, so in this particular case, I work at the intersection of art and science, as Dr. McCallum was saying, and I make installation and sculpture. Oftentimes, I'm creating work out of cast-off materials, metals, glass, bricks, as a way to speak about the environment that I'm in, but also the time and the place. So my work is really informed by that. In this case, this project, I'm interested in making work that tells a story about what's happening in the environment, to the earth, to create an experience. Daily we're being bombarded by horrible statistics about climate change and biodiversity loss and other incredible, horrendous social issues. And I feel that art has this amazing way to help people feel something, connect you. It's only when you feel connected to something that you're willing to do anything or to even have a conversation or to begin to think about it. So recently I've been thinking about other ways to tell stories that actually do good work in the environment. Aside from just connecting to people with what's happening to the land, I want to create sculptures that actually go into the environment and do something good. So having a background in zoology, I'm able to work across disciplines. And in this case, I worked with bee biologists from Columbia and from the University of Kansas. This is a recent project where I went out to the field with this bee biologist and learned that over 70% of the world's bees live underground. They're burrowing bees. And they're some of the most incredible pollinators in the world. They pollinate the majority of our food. They tend to be better pollinators than the honeybees for a lot of species because they've evolved with the plants where they live. And so this is us in the field watching these burrowing bees coming out of the ground. I just wanted to learn about them, to understand them. I wanted to know, okay, so we know that our honeybees are being challenged. We know that we're losing them, but what's happening to our wild bees? Well, the same thing that's happening to our honeybees is happening with wild bees. Climate change is affecting them in numerous ways. And without them, we don't exist. I thought, well, what can I do? What can I create to help these animals? Could I do something for them? So with this biologist, I began observing them work. I became like her second grad student. I just went into the field with her as soon as I could, as often as I could. I started studying what capacity, how close each of their holes are. These are solitary bees, so they need solitary holes. They don't have a queen. They're their own reina, you know, they do their own thing. So I thought, these are really incredible bees. I want to do something. So I started studying all the aspects of the natural history. There they are right there. That's the Coletes bee. Isn't she pretty? And so what I learned was that these bees need about a foot deep to make their burrows, and they need about 5 to 6 inches wide to make their little nest shoots. And I generally am a sculptor that works with my hands. I prefer my hands to most tools, but I decided that I was working in this place called the Interdisciplinary Ceramic Research Center, and there was this very fancy 3D printer from Italy, and I thought, okay, nobody's using this, I want to learn to use it. So I started calling on my students that were engineers and designers, and I started making sketches by hand, super primitive, and they started helping me to take those and put those into a CAD program so that this machine could read my sketches and it could be printed out into a 3D form, a habitat. I wanted to create a habitat. So here they are being printed out, and you can see the openings, they're chambers, and those chambers go underground, and in each of those openings get filled with soil. And it's the soil that they prefer. It's kind of sandy, it's not too clayey. And you can see, I'm working with a young design student here. This isn't actually an easy feat. Getting this thing to print properly took hours and hours. I could have made hundreds of these in the time that I made 10, but I wanted to learn this technology. So it's printing out slowly, and this is them unglazed. So you can see the chamber sitting above ground. That chamber actually gets buried, and then the sculptures get screwed onto the top. Those are visual indicators. So as the bee flies overhead, they can see that flower. Oh, that's my hole. That's my aggregate. That's where I live. And then I started studying with the biologists and lots of research. I started studying how bees see, what spectrum. Well, they see in ultraviolet. I couldn't make glazes in ultraviolet, so I created the colors that they really are attracted to. So dandelion yellows, daffodil blues, limey greens. They don't like really dark colors. So I don't generally work in this color palette, but I wasn't working for myself or my own aesthetic. I was working for the bees. So in this case, this is a habitat. I call them ceramitats. This is installed in front of the Spencer Museum on the University of Kansas. There's 7 ceramitats installed on the campus, and the research is currently going on. So the bee biologist that I work with and all of her grad students, they're studying these habitats and seeing whether they are actually being inhabited by the bees. And once they're inhabited, we're going to study whether they're actually helping to protect the bees. The idea is that instead of the bee biologist coming and digging up a whole area of land, they can literally dig this chamber up, pull it out of the ground, study the bees inside of each chamber, and put them back without disrupting the mycorrhizae, any other living organisms, but they can learn from these ceramitats. These also can be moved. These ceramitats can be moved into people's gardens. They can be moved into orchards, any area that we want to invite these bees to come and pollinate the land. So I was asked how sort of my research and my work leads into what I do with my students. And I create curriculum, I create classes that are called art and ecology, sculpture intercepting the waste stream. But I also think about projects and how encouraging my students to use their voice to connect with their community. They don't necessarily have to want to be an earth protector, but I want you to figure out what your voice is so you can speak about it with clay. And a lot of my pedagogy is based around that, is inspiring my students to go out and speak, talk about what they're passionate about with the media of clay. Thanks you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great. All 3 of these of y'all's talks just bring up so many important topics and great ideas in your research, and also making a positive impact in the environment and the way we look at history. It's incredible, and I love how it's dovetailing into our studies of material culture, even in our art history classes. So it's just really inspiring. Thank you all for talking with us a little bit about your practice.